بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا حبيبنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters, I was away for about 2 weeks and a lot has happened in our country in the last 2 weeks as I hear and I see from the news. So today I will address some of those issues, but inshallah from a generic perspective. What should the Muslims do and how should the Muslim respond to a non-Muslim dying? Of course, the Queen of this country has died, we all know. But what should the Muslims respond to a non-Muslim's death? How should we do? What should be our response? It's a generic topic that I would like to address today. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam was sitting with his companions one day, and a funeral procession was passing by. And he saw the funeral, and he stood up. When he stood up, the companions complained, Ya Rasulullah, don't you know this is the funeral of a Jewish person? Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, was he not a human being? Now some scholars, my brothers and sisters, have said that the rule to stand up in honor of the dead has been abrogated. This was in the early days of his life in Medina. So it doesn't apply anymore. But the rule to stand up may have been abrogated, but to show rahmah, mercy, and compassion to your fellow human beings have not been abrogated. So you don't have to stand up in honor of somebody who has died, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. That's of course understandable, that's a Sharia matter. But what prevents you from showing compassion to somebody who is non-Muslim, who may have died, who may have been your neighbor, who you may have lived in the surrounding area? It could even be a person who is related to you. For example, my mother-in-law is non-Muslim. My brother-in-law is non-Muslim. My brother-in-law is not well at the moment. He may pass away very soon. What should be my response to my brother-in-law when he passes away? I remember in the early days of my marriage, I used to go to my in-laws' house very often. I was very fond of my father-in-law, and we got on very well. I did not speak his language, he spoke Hungarian, and he did not speak my language, English. But we went everywhere together. We became best of friends. We played, we horse rode, we fished, we traveled, we kayaked, we hiked, we did everything possible together as a son-in-law and a father-in-law, like two best friends, never being able to speak in the common language. We became very close. One day he died, unfortunately, and I found it very difficult to go back to Hungary after his death. I told my wife, I don't want to come back to your country because your father is no longer alive. He died as a non-Muslim. What should be my response to my father-in-law, who I very much loved, who loved me very much, and I cared for him and he cared for me? Or how should we treat our non-Muslim relatives, neighbors, and friends when they die? Many people, out of ignorance, hatred, speak out all sorts of nonsense. And you would see this being talked about by many in the social media. All you have to do is pick up one of the social media and you see at the back of the death of the Queen, so much has been said. My brothers and sisters, whether the Queen is going to go to heaven or hell is none of your business. Please get it in your head. Whether you will go to heaven or hell, nobody can guarantee. In the Quran, Allah talks about believers and non-believers and their destination. Of course, Allah does that very clearly. And He says who is going to go to heaven and who is going to go to hell. Allah says that, but not you and me. And does Allah talk about specifically about a non-Muslim who's going to go to hell? Yes, Abu Lahab mentioned in the Quran. But does Allah talk about any other non-Muslim by their name who is going to go to hell? Fir'aun maybe? Some of those big evil. We can for certainty say Allah said, so therefore they're going to go to hell. But if Allah hasn't said somebody's name, you and I have no right to suggest that they're going to go to hell or heaven. So those Muslims who were showing absolute disdain, disgust and anger, and were saying all sorts of nonsense at the back of Queen's death, my brothers and sisters, such statements came from ignorance and hatred. Nothing more, nothing less. Somebody has died. Somebody's mother has died. Somebody's grandmother has died. You may not like the Queen. That's okay. That's not a problem. I'm not a monarchist or royalist. I've already spoken about it. I say to people, nobody should have the right to rule anybody by virtue of birth. You're not born to rule. You should be a ruler based on your credential, based on your attributes, based on your qualities. People should have the right to elect you, unelect you. But with the royal families, we don't have that right. Just because you're born in a family, just because your genes have given you the right to rule, doesn't give you the legitimacy to rule. But that's a different discussion. This person is dead, was the queen of this country for 70 years. The nation is mourning. What should the Muslims say when the nation is mourning? What should we say? What should we do? We are part and parcel of this country, aren't we? This is our home. Has been the home of my parents for a very long time. My father came to this country in 1956, and he died in this country. We buried him in Walthamstow. I'm here. My children will never, ever go to Bangladesh, where my parents came from, probably for holiday. They will not go back, because I don't even go back. And they come from a mixed race, Hungary and Bangladesh mixed together, lived in Britain. Why would they go to any country like Bangladesh anyway? It's too far. I've just come from Africa. Living in such countries is tough. Such continent is tough. I remember going to sleep every morning, waking up, my entire body has been eaten alive by mosquitoes. Our children won't be able to cope in that climate. Forget about those small things, but the reality is, this is our home. In a home where you live with the non-Muslims around you, surely you have a duty and a responsibility to respond to a grief that a nation is facing and suffering, even if you disagree with royalists and monarchists. Surely we as Muslims can demonstrate some degree of compassion towards the people around. Surely we are allowed to make dua for those who are alive. We are allowed to make dua for those who are alive, right? The Quranic verse is very clear. Don't make dua or don't ask Allah to forgive those who have died in a state of kufr. Those who have died in a state of kufr, don't make dua for istighfar for them. Don't ask Allah to forgive them. Why would you ask Allah to forgive somebody, Allah that they did not believe in? Why would you ask? It doesn't make any sense, does it? The person who died did not believe in Allah. Why would you ask Allah to forgive them? Logical sense, right? But it does not stop you from making dua for the living. You could say, Ya Allah, give the living sabr, patience. Give the living iman in you one day. Give the living and open their hearts so that they can accept your deen. You can surely make dua for the living, saying, Ya Allah, at a time of this national grief, show the entire world that you are the true owner of life and death. You could be the king or the queen of the world. You could be the most powerful man or the woman of the world. You could have the most powerful army in the world. You could be the richest man in the world, richest woman in the world. You could bring all the medicine, all the doctors of the world. You cannot prevent death. Ya Allah, show the world that you are the controller of life and death. Surely you can make that dua. Can you not make that dua for the non-Muslims around you? Surely, my brothers and sisters, you have in your heart a degree of passion that will enable you to make dua out of mercy for those who are around you. And yet, when I see Muslims making very derogatory, very rude, insulting remark about the Queen who has died and their family, I find utterly despicable behavior I can't even describe with words. Why would you do that? If you have nothing good to say, can you not stay silent? I know from the life of Rasulullah when a non-Muslim, I can't remember his name, came to Rasulullah and said, oh Muhammad, you've been teaching and preaching all nonsense about this new religion that you've got. Tell me who is better, you or Abdul Muttalib? I'm asking Rasulullah this question. Who is better, you or Abdul Muttalib? What should Rasulullah say? He stayed silent. He said nothing. Because saying something will only validate this idiot. Wisdom requires you to understand also to keep your mouth zipped. That's also wisdom. It's not just to keep on speaking any nonsense that comes to your mind. It is also wise to not say anything. To speak at the right time, in the right way, in the right manner, and also stay silent is wisdom. If you can't say anything good about this person who has died, and anything good for the family who's living, keep your mouth zipped. They're grieving, let them grieve. I don't understand, my brothers and sisters, why Muslims cannot display any compassion for people who are around them. Do you hate your non-Muslim neighbors and non-Muslims around so much? I know you don't, but it looks like some people do. And they hate the country or the non-Muslims so much, but they still live in this country and take all the privileges that come in their way. It makes no sense. Allah says in the Quran, be just. Be just. And don't allow your hatred of other people move you away from justice. Don't allow hatred or enmity of people deter you from serving justly. What is just? Somebody has died, saying words of condolences to that family, making dua for the living. You know, brothers and sisters, the sin of the dead does not preclude the alive from receiving your condolences, your mercy and your compassion and your dua. It's like saying, my father committed a sin, so therefore all his children will never be treated well. How does that make sense? If you think Queen Elizabeth, who passed away, was an evil woman, let that be between Allah and her when she rises on the Day of Judgment. There is nothing you can do for her now. She's dead. Surely her children deserve a word of condolence, saying, we hope and pray that you find patience in your heart. Making dua, Rasulullah, this is sunnah of Rasulullah to write letters to the powerful in the world, inviting them to Islam. It is an opportunity to say, Prince Charles, now King Charles, we feel sorry that you've lost your mother. We know that you love Islam because you've written so much about it, you've spoken so much about it. It's time for you perhaps to consider Islam. At the back of your mother's death, you may want to live to worship the one and only Lord that you so much love, that Islam teaches. It's good opportunity for Muslims to demonstrate not just compassion, not just love, but extend words of sympathy and empathy to a family that is grieving, instead of being vitriolic, instead of espousing hatred, instead of showing insults, etc. Brothers and sisters, it appears to me, and please forgive me if I've got it wrong, there are some Muslims, especially younger ones. If you're young, please forgive me. If you're young, you're trigger happy, it looks like. You just want to fire at anybody at any time randomly. I wrote a message on my Facebook, a simple message sending condolences to the family. La ilaha illallah. You should have seen the types of abuse and insults I got from Muslims. Wallahi, Muslims were insulting me, abusing me, asking me the very basic question. Somebody wrote to me, Imam, I understand that you've sent condolences, but do you not know? So I wrote to him, brother, you called me the Imam. Why are you calling me an Imam and insulting me at the same time? Don't you understand that I would not be making a statement of such basic nature if I don't understand my religion? Why are you contradicting yourself? I had so much hatred for Muslims alone. I make dua for our brothers and sisters that Allah guide them and remove from our hearts hatred for one another. For hatred is the worst enemy of humanity. Imagine your neighbor thinks you hate them. Imagine your neighbor thinks you hate them. What kind of a relationship would you have with them? And Rasulullah said, your neighbor has a right over you. In fact, he said, I'm worried that your neighbor has so much right over you. Next time Jibreel comes to me, he will say, your neighbor is entitled to inheriting your wealth when you die. Neighbor has a right over you. And if your neighbor thinks you hate them, what kind of right do they have over you? My brothers and sisters, how much more can I say to you to emphasize that we as Muslims must demonstrate the best of manners, best of conduct, and best way to deal with our non-Muslim friends and Muslim friends because of our religion, which is based on compassion, based on mercy, based on forgiveness, based on togetherness, and based on looking at another human being as Allah's creation too. So I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not asking you to stand up and sing the national anthem. I'm not asking you to demonstrate your love for the Queen or the King. That's not my problem. That's your business. Where I speak from the pulpit is when you make this a religious issue. Showing sympathy to somebody who has died has nothing to do with religion. It's to do with humanity. You are a human being. You will feel sympathy for a cat that dies on your street. My neighbor's cat was run over by a car. I came home and I saw my daughter crying. I said to her, why are you crying? She goes, Daddy, neighbor's cat has been killed. I said, I've never seen you cry for anybody else. It's a joke. We're human beings, brothers and sisters. We have to learn that our deen has come not to create hatred, but to create love and peace amongst ourselves. So, before you misunderstand me and go and start misquoting me outside, I know you won't. Here is a challenge for you. Ask yourself, when somebody dies from your family, if a non-Muslim came and said, hi, I'm really sorry, you've lost your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, would you reject it? Would you reject it saying, you're non-Muslim, I don't want any sympathy from you? You wouldn't reject it. Why do you think a non-Muslim doesn't deserve your sympathy and compassion when they lose somebody from their families? Do you not use your brain to even think? You have narrowed down the religion to a small, fine, absolutely impossible way to live and practice. Some Muslims even tell me, brother, if this is Islam, I don't want to know Islam. I say to them, this is not Islam. This is some ignorant Muslim behavior. Nothing to do with Islam. Separate it. Demonstrate compassion. And like Rasulullah showed honor to his neighbor, show honor to your neighbor. Allah will show you honor on the day of judgment. Wa akhir da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So what should we do as Muslims if we hear the death of a non-Muslim? What should we do? We are not allowed to pray for their forgiveness. Remember this. But did you know Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam said to Allah, oh Allah, those who don't follow me, if you wish to punish them, it's up to you. But if you forgive them, then you're the Lord of the world, the most merciful. Having non-verbalized wish is allowed according to our deen. So if a Muslim wishes, I wish Allah will forgive them, wishes and not verbalizes it, that's not a problem. What's not allowed is for you to verbalize it. Why? Because Allah knows we're a human being and we will have all sorts of wishes. When my mother-in-law passes away, she's very elderly now, don't you think my wife, who is her daughter, will wish in her heart, if only Allah forgives my mother? Don't you think she would do that? So what we're not allowed to do is to verbalize dua of forgiveness for those who die in a state of disbelief. But apart from that, you're allowed to send condolences. You're allowed to go and see them. You're allowed to go and say, I'm really sorry you've lost somebody. I make dua for you, the living, that Allah gives you the best in your heart, patience, mercy, and guidance. Surely, we should be human enough to understand this basic logic, and I don't need to give a khutbah on this. If you get into an argument with a Muslim on this topic and a Muslim is talking anything else, just say, Salamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, my brother, sister, I'm really sorry. I don't want to engage, salam, and walk away. Because you know that person is coming from ignorance. They're not coming from a place of objectivity, fairness, and justice. They're angry. They've got hatred in their heart. Make dua that Allah removes it from their hearts. We need to rise above that. We need to regain the ground Islam has taught all the way. From Mecca, from Medina, Islam came to Spain. From Indonesia, Malaysia, all the way to the southern coast of France, Islam did not spread through hatred, my brothers and sisters. Do you think Islam was spread through hatred? Do you think people of other religions and faiths would leave their ways and enter Islam in large number if they experienced hatred from the Muslims? Surely not. Allah says in the Quran, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ بِالْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. O Muhammad, if it wasn't that Allah had given you a lenient heart and Allah had been merciful to you, even when they had betrayed you in Battle of Uhud, you still forgave them. You not only forgave them, but you still consulted them with their affairs even after all of that. Once you've decided after consulting, فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ, and then rely on Allah. Look at Rasulullah example. Allah is saying, "Oh Muhammad, your heart is so big and lenient, and it is by the mercy of Allah you have such leniency in yourself that people come to you and flock to you in large number because of your character and your behavior." So we as Muslims must demonstrate the same level of character and behavior in our society, my brothers and sisters, and rid our hearts of hatred of anybody. We should not hate anybody. Yes, we should hate the actions that lead to problems and chaos in people's lives and society. But every human being has the potential to embrace Islam, and every human being, if they're Muslim and if they've been sinning, have the potential to be forgiven. Why would you like to hate somebody like that? There is a nice saying of beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He understood human nature very well, and he said, if you must love somebody, don't love them too much, just in case you need to dislike something about them. And if you want to dislike somebody, don't dislike them too much, just in case you need to like them later on. Look at the way, the balance between the two. We should not harbor hatred in our hearts. So the message I'm making is, we would learn from history that this event in the UK will remain a significant event in the lifetime of all of us who are alive today. It will be talked about, and this will cover the news media for the next few days, funeral and post-funeral. We're not going anywhere. How do we make our home comfortable? What messages are we sending out to the non-Muslims, our fellow citizens of this country? It must be simple 3 messages, my brothers and sisters. This is my home. Britain is my home. I'm very comfortable in my home. Number 2, British people are my people. Whether they're Muslims or non-Muslims, it doesn't matter. They're my people, and I care for them. And number 3, I am willing to do everything possible for the well-being of my country and my people, because they are the ones Allah will ask me a question about on the Day of Judgment. You know, on the Day of Judgment, Allah will not be asking me about Bangladesh, because Bangladesh is thousands of miles away. It's beyond my control. Allah will not be asking you about Pakistan or India or Sudan or Eritrea or Afghanistan or Iraq or any other parts of the world, or Turkey, wherever you come from. Allah will not be asking you about that. Allah will be asking you about people of Southgate. Yeah, Ajmal, you lived in Southgate. What about your neighbor? Did they know much about Islam? How did you invest your time with them? You lived in Cockfosters, you lived in Hadley Wood, you lived in Oakwood, you lived in all of these areas in North London. Did your neighbors know about your deen? Did you go and reach to them? Did you knock on their doors? Did you stand with them when they needed you most? Or were you too busy thinking, I'm protected, I'm safe, let them go to hell? Is that what you did? Brothers and sisters, on the Day of Judgment, such an attitude will become our nemesis and a problem. So Allah will ask us about our neighbors, and our neighbors are the people around us. Rasulullah was asked, Ya Rasulullah, how do we know which neighbor has more rights over us? Look at this. Rasulullah said, if you've got 2 neighbors on 2 sides of your house, the one whose door is closer to your house is the neighbor who has more rights over you. Allahu Akbar. It's so precise because He wants us to never neglect our neighbors. Never neglect our neighbors. And I use the word neighbors in the widest sense of the word possible. In the surroundings where you live, in the country where you live, let us demonstrate our willingness to make a difference. May Allah accept it and may Allah forgive us. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya Akramul Akramin, accept our dua, Ya Allah. Make us the best of people, Ya Allah. Remove from our hearts any hatred, Ya Allah. Remove from our lives anger, Ya Allah. Remove from our hearts anger and hatred, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, we ask you and we beg you to guide the people of this country to your deen, Ya Allah. We ask you to guide the people of this country to your deen, Ya Allah. Open up the hearts of our neighbors, our non-Muslim friends to your deen, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, keep our children in your deen, Ya Allah. Keep us all as good Muslims, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, totally dedicated to serving you, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya Akramul Akramin, forgive us, Ya Allah. Forgive us, Ya Allah. Forgive us, Ya Allah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, free all parts of the world that is occupied, Ya Allah. Free all parts of the world that is in troubles and turmoils, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, we make special dua for Pakistan as it faces horrendous flood and the consequences. Ya Rab, have mercy on them, Ya Allah. Free every part of the world that is in trouble, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, we ask you to forgive us, Ya Allah. Unite us, Ya Allah, and keep us together, Ya Rab. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون والله يعلم ما تصنعون. أقم الصلاة. Please stand up and make the line straight.